there, dear listener. I'm your host, Erwin Blackthorn, and this is the Dirty Lore House podcast, coming at you with all the deliciously nutty dirty lore. Today, we are going to be talking about personalities in writing and how to view it in an alchemical lens. So last time I talked about alchemy, I went over how it relates to things like the hero's journey and how it relates to plot and tarot cards. And this time, I'm going to be talking about how alchemy allows us to understand personalities. And personalities are a very interesting thing for pretty much anyone, which is why many people like to see a character-focused story. And personality can be expressed through either how somebody talks, how somebody walks, dresses, how they react to things. But pretty much whenever we're talking about personalities, we're trying to talk about how somebody responds to something in a particular way. And so we have all sorts of different kinds of personalities, which could be based off of something that's primal, based on something that's, biologically implanted into us. We can have a personality that's influenced by some kind of nurture or some kind of trauma. And I guess we can also have personalities that are created by some kind of influence, either from media or from some kind of social subject. And so all these different kinds of influences and forces are causing us to respond in certain ways. And some people go, oh, well, that's, I'm an independent person. I'm an individual. I can respond any way I want to. Well, can you? Because some people are pretty iffy when they get told what they are. Isn't that a personality they can't really control? Why can't they just control that aspect of themselves? And it really is sometimes knee-jerk. It's primitive. It's a primal drive. Also in antiquity, we had 12 Zodiacs, but then a 13th one sprouted out later on as people started to understand space a bit more. And so this 13th one is, however you pronounce it, Officius or whatever. For anybody who's played Persona, you remember Officius as like your main persona in Persona 3. The one with the harp, and fire attacks. And what's interesting is that in that game, a lot of these personas, they are based off of particular characters from mythology or some kind of story. And these are all pretty much basic personalities that can be copied or expressed in some way from a person, even if they don't know they're copying it or expressing it in that particular way. And this is because a persona is, in Jungian sense, it's very basic, but it's just kind of like a mimicry of something that you've seen or something that you sort of understand as like a particular. So if you want to mimic like a clown, you do like juggling or, honk your nose or something. You're trying to mimic something in particular to signal that you are this thing. And this is what we do among other people so that they can get an idea of who we are at a first glance. But they don't know our whole story because we're just giving them a persona as a mask through our face and through our actions for them to just kind of get a single idea rather than the entire picture, because the entire picture is a huge vat of chaos, You're not going to tell everybody your entire life story, like when you first meet them. I mean, some people do. They're crazy. They're called white women. But when it comes to Zodiacs, we get a basic idea of what someone's personality could be, a very primal expression of it. So the main thing you do have to remember for Zodiacs, and if you don't want to use Zodiacs, no big deal. You're just not going to be really making a good character. It's going to be too chaotic. It's going to be zero structure to it. And you're going to be basing it all off of nurture. There's no nature to it, so expect people to see your work as postmodernist, so that's your goal. But, Zodiacs are just a symbol for us to understand what we're kind of talking about. You don't have to have these particular Zodiacs determine your entire character. It's just an aspect of your character. And it's a great way to see how your character is going to be responding to certain stimuli. Some people are absent-minded, other people are slothy, other people are too active or too emotional, or, you can be too stoic. There's all sorts of extremes and all sorts of things in the middle, and the Zodiacs, they just try to kind of put things together to kind of show that this particular kind of person survived in this way or copies this kind of, symbol, and that's why most of these symbols are animals. In the Chinese zodiacs, they're all animals, but in the Greek zodiacs, it's kind of, it's like animals, and then there's like a couple of mythological ones, and then there's like a scale, But all you really do have to remember for Greek zodiacs, the classic ones of the Western world, is that there's fire, air, water, and earth. And last time I talked about those 4 classic elements. And it's so simple to think of everything in the number 4. Most of us have 4 fingers on one hand, it's not that hard to count. Even Simpson characters have 4 fingers. So, when it comes to the zodiacs, you have fire, which last time we were talking, I was talking about how it's the highest point, almost to a spiritual level. Oh, I mean, it is a spiritual realm. But it's the one where it's less solid, the least solid thing possible, plasma of the elemental of the elemental states, right? And so fire, it is considered the exciting, fun, enthusiastic, like leadership kind of role, because that's kind of where the spirit realm is. And that's also kind of what we get from the sun. The sun kind of gives us this like fiery leadership. It guides everything. It gives birth to things. But it's also very dangerous. So whether it's a danger to itself or a danger to others, the fire element in the zodiacs, it's a very active personality. All right, so you're not going to get anything boring from these people. Then next you have air. And air is more about the mental realm of thinking, of intelligence. So the zodiacs related to air, these are going to be very social. They analyze things. They feel like they need to share their thoughts with the world. They are the philosophers. They are the teachers. They are the writers. They have something to say, and it's because they saw something, and then so they spread information to others. And then after that, you have water. And when it comes to the zodiacs, the water zodiacs are more about emotion than intelligence. They're more about actually being social, but more in a way that allows people to know their feelings. So with these are the artists, and these are the musicians. They have very alluring personalities because they let us feel like we want to know more about them. You can consider them mysterious even. And it's also kind of how the water of the ocean is mysterious, because we kind of dive in there and then it's like, where is the bottom of this? There's an iceberg here. There's more to the iceberg than what we see from the surface. And so they can be considered deep. They don't necessarily have to be, but they're more likely to be this way. And then the last one is Earth. And the Earth people, they're very stable. They're stoic. They are the hard workers who just, they clock in, clock out. They feel like their job is their role, their identity. They also can feel a bit more materialistic than others because they depend on earthly possessions. Their idea is that they have a goal, and then so they follow through with this goal in the material realm, and so they're not really going to be the religious type. I mean, maybe they are, but it's not going to be like, I can live in luxury in heaven or something. They want to live in luxury now, they want things now. And so with these 4, we have 3 zodiacs for each. And then on top of this, we also have 3 types of zodiacs. And that is cardinal. These are the leaders. Then there is fixed. These are the ones who don't want to change anything about themselves. They are very resistant to things that are, what do we call it? They are very resistant to nurture. They're very resistant to nurture. And so it's very difficult to change their mind once they've already set their mind. And then there's mutable, and these are the ones who go with the flow. They're always just following through with whatever people say, and they're very easy to change their mind. And they're always trying to avoid issues. They're not going to be pig-headed about anything. But at the same time, being mutable causes you to be easily distracted because your focus is always going to be changing on something else. And so this can be considered like, the very watery of water, or like the very chaotic of fire, or the very, like how the seasons change on Earth, So to make an example, my sign is Libra, and that means that I am an air sign, meaning I'm more focused on being a writer, trying to do philosophy and stuff like that, trying to think of thinking, pretty much, and trying to find intelligence. And then I'm also a cardinal sign, so that means I'm trying to lead others towards the way that I think, and that's why Libras are trying to find a balance. That's their whole entire thing. So with that said, you could find an easy to understand definition of each one just by understanding which one's cardinal and which one's of the particular element. Now, I'm going to go back to these. I just want you to kind of sit back and go, okay, I can understand these four elements, three types, 3 signs, right? And that makes 12. 4 times 3 is 12. But then on top of this, personality is also kind of influenced by the 7 planets. Now, these 7 planets are in relation to, honestly, for me, I can't even really remember this kind of stuff when it comes to Zodiacs, because I find this particular element very boring and very, hyper-fixated on something that doesn't really matter, right? So when it comes to the planets move around in our solar system, and then the sky around us kind of stays in the same place. So depending on the day, depending on the time, depending on when there's depending on when you have a determinant or the exhalation or the fall, honestly, I don't care about those. You could look into those, but it's something that I don't really care too much about it. So when you have these 4 elements, you can pretty much narrow it down to, well, okay, there's leaders, there's the stubborn folk, and then there's the followers, right? And then on top of that, there are different kinds who are energetic, or they're focused on intelligence, or they're focused on emotions, or they're focused on pretty much what is themselves, or some kind of invention kind of thing. They might want to make things more luxurious in the world. So these 12 types of personalities, they really do help strengthen your own story, because you do need kind of a leader in there, and you do need some followers in there, and you do need some people who reject, either the follower or the leader. You need somebody who goes, no, I'm not going to do what you tell me. I'm going to do my own thing. And, maybe you don't have that many characters. Maybe you're not going to have 12 at every time, right? But no matter what your story is, if you have characters and you're focusing on the characters, you're going to need to give them some particular kind of direction and idea for them to function in the story itself. I know this sounds very basic, and you're like, okay, you're telling me something I already know about, but really think about it. Why does your character do the things that they do? And I'm very confident when I say that not many writers understand their own characters. And I do think this is because there's a lot of people out there, and this is not a problem, but there's a lot of people out there who try to make their story in a, what do you call it? An experimental discovery kind of way. They want to discover who their character is. Well, I believe in that, and I don't believe in that at the same time. And I'll explain this one. There's a lot of moments where some people say that your character is not a real thing, that your character doesn't really exist. And, that's kind of, that's what Jenna Morrissey says. In one of her videos, she says, your character doesn't really exist. You're not really discovering who they are. You're just making things up as you go along. And, she says how, people complain, oh, my character is not cooperating today. And she goes, no, you're just being lazy. And honestly, I do kind of see where she's coming from, but I also understand where people are coming from when they say that their character is not responding today. They're not feeling it because it's not really them. It's not part of who they are. They have to find the persona within themselves, and that's a pretty hard thing to do for some people. Not everybody's cut out to be the writer type, but some people are a storyteller type. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but, there are people with ideas, there's people with a way to say the idea, and then there's people who can draw the idea, some people who can film the idea, or make a game of the idea so other people can play through it. Not everybody's going to be a jack of all trades. So some people are designed to kind of get an idea of things, and that's probably why they have so many different people working at these corporate jobs where they have, one writer for every single different character or something. Who knows how many writers were working on Avengers or whatever. It's like that meme where you have like 20 different writers working on that like Beyonce song, and all she says is like 3 different lines. But I think you know what I mean. It's not really that easy for some people to understand their own character, especially when they think that their character is separate from them. And I think that these people, they need to realize the character is not separate from them. The character is simply separate from their current personal persona that they're presenting to the outside, and they have no clue who they are on the inside. And that's really what it is, because when we're telling the story, every single aspect that we are delivering to the reader, that's a part of us. That's something that we are thinking of, whether or not we agree with it. You know, you have these shows or these movies where some character, they're like killing like thousands of soldiers or gang members or whatever it is. I mean, you know, put somebody in that kind of situation, give them the gun, and who knows what they would do with that. If they had that kind of skill and that kind of ability, it's dangerous. It's scary sometimes. Pretty much anybody in that kind of predicament with that ability, of course they're going to do it. What in their personality is stopping them? Like, this is why I think that some people these days, they don't understand how the human brain evolved. We didn't come from this pampered world of, you know, grapes having the seeds squeezed out before we're fed them, while we're laying down on some, whatever you call it, some marble lazy boy with a bunch of slaves fanning us with a giant palm tree branch. That's not how we developed. All right, we developed from basically monkeys, right? And if we didn't know, monkeys are very violent. They rip each other's faces off at the drop of a banana. And we had to realize that we have monkey energy. You know, as funny as that sounds, yeah, we have monkey energy. We have big monkey muscle energy. And that's still part of us. And that's why we enjoy these movies where, like, you know, something blows up and people fly around and crash into like a bunch of glass or crash through walls, or, you know, you got those Superman movies that everybody likes where, you know, Superman's like punching some guy through another wall, or, you know, there's punching a guy through a wall, and then that guy like flies through the wall, through the building, into like 5 helicopters and like 10 gasoline trucks. Or whatever the fuck. What the hell was that movie? Man of Steel? You know, that's like every single movie, and people go, oh, I don't like that. That looks boring. But you know what? The movie company's gonna make it. People are gonna watch it. We like crappy things, and we had to admit to that. We had to admit that we like crappy things. This is why those movies with, what are those movies called? The found footage films, you know, are interesting to these really crappy movies, and our lack of ability to learn that these suck. Okay, that these really suck. But, you know, who's watching them? There were people who were going out on a date, teenagers mostly, PG-13, that explains a lot. And they were just watching it because, hey, you know, watch some spooky movie, the person gets startled, the girl gets shocked, her titties bounce like crazy. Yeah, it's a perfect date, right? So I know I'm digressing about this craziness involving the the movies we have nowadays, but no matter what you want to tell yourself, you can't say to yourself that you are smarter than these giant corporations, okay? Just because you think that you're going to be making a better character, better story, whatever you want to say is better, okay? Measure your dick as much as you want. You're still not going to fuck better than these giant corporations making millions of dollars. Okay, why? Well, you don't think like they do, and you don't understand the audience like they do. And these corporations, they follow through with things that are alchemial, but they don't say it. They don't want to say it because then that's releasing the secret to everybody else. This is a big, huge, long-winded way of me saying, use the Zodiacs, even though people online tell you not to, because the people online are lying to you about what works, so that you go ahead and do something that doesn't work, and you get fucked in the ass later on. Zodiacs are important. Look into them. If I feel like I should explain every single Zodiac, maybe I will make a video about that. But, you know, this is just like a basic introduction to the Zodiacs, because I also want to talk about the classical planets. Now, the classical planets, these are interesting to me just because of how mythology works. and how people of antiquity believed in things. Now, consider me somebody who's like a Greek mythology person, but I'm actually not that into Greek mythology. I'm more into things like Eastern stuff, even though I don't remember a lot of the names. So it's one of those things where, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. But, we're in the West, so... And Western stuff is actually a bit more popular than Eastern stuff, sadly. So if you are going to be trying to appeal to a big mass, use a bit of both. If you can use a bit of both, then you're going to succeed. But I'm going to talk about the classical planets, and then I'm going to go off into the 12 Chinese zodiacs, okay? So that's going to be my little transition here. So the 7 planets, this is the intermission. Get your popcorn, take a nap, whatever the fuck you want to do. I know this subject isn't very enduring, but you kind of have to look through it and listen through it in order to become a better writer, because this is part of the research. And this is also why old mythology, it sticks with us for so long, thousands of years. Imagine if a story survives thousands of years. You can't have that these days. Are people really going to be digging up old DVDs of Twilight or something and going, oh, this is a relic from the olden days of the 2000s. Let's pop it into our old DVD player that we found at the fucking museum. Our fossilized DVD player. Imagine 2,000 years from now, people are flying around their jets and cars. Are they really going to be thinking back and being like, you know what? Twilight was a pretty cool thing. I hope that we learned that in what do you call that? Our old American mythologies class, whatever you want to call that. You know what I'm talking about? Nobody's going to be thinking about nobody's even going to be thinking about Avengers or anything, 2,000 years from now. Maybe, but it's a big maybe. What's another thing that's kind of popular now that people are, Fortnite, or people are going to be thinking about that as a mythology? No, mythology is very deep. It's incredibly useful, and it's a big part of our lives that we can't really get rid of it, because we dealt with mythology for thousands of years, and then a couple hundred years of people not believing in it and not really following it, just trying to deconstruct it. And you think that's going to change anything? Hell no, that's going to change nothing. It's going to take more. Do you understand how many thousands of years that was in our culture? And then people now want to remove that by deconstructing it, or just, saying, oh, no mythology at all. That means that if we're starting now around 2000, it would take about until the year 4000 just to have a chance at kind of getting rid of mythology from, antiquity, from the Greeks and the Chinese mythology and Buddhist mythology, Japanese, and what else is there? Norse mythology and Egyptian, right? This is hardcore. This is deep into our cultures. And it's so deep because all of our cultures originated from pretty much the same places. And then they traveled around, they spoke to each other, they were actually social instead of trying to attack each other every five, you know what I mean? They were trying to kill each other, but they tried to merge their cultures instead of separate them like crazy. And then whoever was the strongest culture won. Okay, who was the strongest culture? Well, it's the ones that created the mythologies. Later on, it was Egyptian, Greek, what else was there? Norse, and Norse mixed with, Germanic and whatever the heck was over there. Celtic kind of survived, but, the Romans messed that up. Thanks, Romans, for messing up Celtic mythology. We love you guys. But either way, what I'm trying to say is that there's these things called the classical planets. And pretty much every single culture in the old days, they looked up at the sky. They didn't have TV. The sky was their TV. That was the internet. That was their dank meme page. That was their can I has cheeseburger. Alright, that was their get to. And it's because as above, so below. Whatever is going up in the stars, it's gotta be going on down here. It's a reflection. It's like a big mirror. And they thought that because they would look at the horizon and they were like, okay, there's this fucking line. Above is blue and below is blue, but they didn't call it blue. Back in the day, they didn't have a word for blue. They would just say different shade of green, like a light green or something like that. It was some kind of different sense of green. And then it wasn't until Egyptians pretty much had blue in their hands And like, okay, this is blue. And this is like sort of the color of the sky and the water. And so colors are very important in antiquity. And there is a big reason why we don't have blue that present in a lot of things. And also, blue was the color of the water and the sky. It was the world beyond our Earth. Because our Earth was like the beach, right? So you had the beach, and you had top of your head as like the limit to where you can reach. You know, the top of your fingers or whatever your body could reach. That's the end of the limit, you know? You can't go any further than that because you can't fly yet. And so this, you know, everything up in the sky, that's blue. Okay, there's something special about that blue thing. Must be aether, must be something magical. That must be what the gods are made of, too. History lesson for that one over. I'm going to go back to the classical planets. Sorry for the mess. So classical planets, no, it's actually related though. So when it comes to the classical planets, we were looking up at the sky and we saw these giant circles or these giant, you know, figures up in the sky, and they were wandering around. And that's why in Greek, planet is basically the word for wanderer, because they went around the sky, and we saw very clear ones. We saw a big red one, that was Mars. We saw a big yellowish one, and that was the sun. We saw a big silvery colored one, and that was the moon. And it looked silver because of all the craters, combined with like the whiteness of the, whatever you call it, moon dust, and that kind of made a silvery look to it. And then we had also Venus, which people could see from, you know, the naked eye. And then we had Mercury, and we had Saturn, and Jupiter. Alright, so these were like 7 things we can see from the sky without a telescope. And this is before we knew about things like Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, right? Those things were fucking far away. And then there's also like Pluto, where they're like, oh, it's not really a planet, it's just like some kind of planetel or whatever they call it, planetite. You know, the Pluto thing is really weird. I don't know why they decided to make it a planet and then say it's not a planet, even though technically, wasn't it where like the moon is bigger than the planet? I don't know, something stupid like that. But these were like the wanderers, and these were things that also influenced our world, because as above, so below, and this is why classical planets are a big thing in alchemy. What we realize is that these planets, they might have stood for a particular god. And so when it comes to these, you know, our days are named after the planets, which is really weird to think about. But at the same time, the planets were named after gods because these were basically like the gods. Mars was, you know, Mars is Ares. And then in Norse mythology, there was Tyr. And then we had like, you know, the moon in Greek is Selena, or what's it called? Selene. And then in Norse, it's also Mani. But Mani is kind of where we got Monday. And then one weird thing is that in Greek, the sun is Helios, but then in Norse and in Roman, it's Sol. So we did get that for Sunday, but it's because in Saxons, the sun is Sunne. So that's where we got sun. And so all these names, they're mostly from Norse. Which some people, they don't really understand. Okay, why is it Norse? The only ones that aren't Norse is Saturn, and that's Saturday. But in Greek, it's Cronus. Each one of these planets, they had a metal, a classic metal, associated with them. And these metals are in relation to kind of like how much of a purity they are. So when it came to the basic metals, we thought of it as 3. Because there was sulfur, mercury, and salt. And then so the 7 metals are pretty much what would happen if you kind of combine each one of these 3 in a different ratio. And so one of them is more salt than the other, one of them is more mercury than the other, and another one's more sulfur than the other. All 7 of them have an aspect of these 3 prima materia. Alright, these prima materia. I think I talked about this before. I think I talked about order and chaos and then the prima materia. If I didn't, you'll learn through proxy. But that's pretty much how it goes. It's like you have God, and then you have order and chaos as the 2 economy, whatever you want to call it, the yin yang. And then after that, you have 3, which is past, present, future. You have sulfur, mercury, and salt. And then you can also consider it as spirit, mind, and body, because that's pretty much what they represent. And so gold was one of the most wealthy, worthy, luxurious materials out there. It was shiny. So when you're handling gold, you're like, okay, why is it like this? Why is it so beautiful, right? Well, they thought that it was because it had the most amount of sulfur in it. But, like not like physically sulfur, like the powder, whatever you want to call it, that smells like rotten eggs. It was a metaphysical sulfur, because metal was not really normal for us to realize. It's like you're going to see a rock, and not only is it shiny, but you can also melt it. And then it can also cut you, it can kill you, it's very dangerous, but it can also protect you. So it's just one of our first forms of tech, that's like not wood or rock. It brought us out of the Stone Age. It's very useful to look at metal as something like the biggest advancements in technology possible, because without metal, we couldn't have like a civilization. We'd still be in the Stone Age, Like, how the fuck are we going to have, what? We're going to have Flintstone cars? We're going to be we're going to be running to pull our own cars, or being pulled by dinosaurs? What the fuck are we going to be doing? I know I'm exaggerating, but you do know what I mean, that we would be stuck in the Stone Age. So metal was a blessing. It was a gift from gods, if you will. So another thing that also kind of made metal seem magical to us was because metal came from the sky in the form of meteors. You'd have a meteor fall down, and what's a meteor mostly made of? It was mostly made of iron, of all things. So a person would find a meteor and go, fuck, there's iron here. Holy shit. I can smelt that and turn it into a goddamn sword. So a lot of Vikings, they would have these swords made of like meteor iron. And it's like, dude, this metal was given to me by a god, and everyone else is like, whoa, cool. So iron is considered one of the lower, I don't want to consider it like a lower quality, but it's more towards salt. And then you have lead as like the most salt-oriented metal. So it goes from left to right with sulfur, mercury, salt. It goes gold, copper, and then silver, and then mercury, then tin, then iron, then lead. It kind of goes from like the most brightest yellowish color over to like the most darker color. Okay, now that's for the West. They had 7 planets, but in the East we had 5. And it was Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. We just removed the moon and the sun because we didn't consider these as part of the planet thing in like, ancient China. It was more like the moon and the sun were beyond that. They were beyond the zodiacs. It's kind of like how air was beyond just the basic phases, because air was chi. So it's like the moon and the sun were kind of like chi for them. It's like some kind of life essence. Like you couldn't really live without this. So Mercury was water, Venus was metal, Mars was fire, Jupiter was Saturn, Earth. And it does kind of make sense when you look at it like a bit differently than the Greeks did, because they were just kind of basing it off of color. Mars, fire, is red. Jupiter has kind of like a woodish color. Saturn might look like an earthly color from far away. Venus might look a bit like a metal. And Mercury might be a little bit blue, from far away. Just because the way that these planets are already colored and the distance and the size. But then so the Chinese zodiacs, they were based off of these 5 phases. And the 5 phases were kind of based off of their 5 planets, as well as the 5 seasons. And they're just looking for anything that can relate to these things. And that's why antiquity is so simple, yet it's incredibly complex in how these symbols mean so many crazy things. It's like a big, huge vat of like all these different meanings. So if you do want to have great symbolism in your story, especially for your characters, try to give them a bit more ancient style symbolism, like water, earth, metal, fire, wood. Something like that is so simple. You look at it in the screen, you hear about that in the story, it's like boom, right there. You're telling your reader what your character is pretty much all about with their symbolism. And most of the time, the reader doesn't even really notice it, but it's a great way to portray an idea without directly telling the reader about something. Very quick example. If somebody's moving very fast and fluid, and you kind of want to relate them to water, just say they're moving like water, moving fluid, like, yeah, when they hit 2 people, it's like a crash of waves, give some kind of water relation to it. And that kind of thing goes a long way, because you're telling your reader about water, and whether or not they understand the Chinese or the Western aspect of the water element or the water phase, it's still going to be stuck in their heads one way or another, because it's been in our storytelling for thousands of years. And that's why so many people, they get a weird feeling whenever they see some kind of like deep symbolism. Or, when you're reading something that's from mythology, you feel like there's very close connection to a lot of the names and a lot of the things that happen. As zany as some of these things are, like, in Greek mythology, you have all these characters that are related having sex with each other. Why is that happening? Well, the postmodernist is going to say, hey, that's just dumb. Why don't we have them, not have sex with each other? But then the pre-modernist is going to look at that and go, well, it's obvious why, The whole point of that is because it's saying that there's a close relationship where they're kind of interacting with each other at a very intimate and primitive level. And to kind of, having to say the whole thing, it doesn't make it sound as interesting, but you can get the same idea by just going, yeah, these two titans are having sex, but then in reality, it's more like, look, the sky and the earth, they're always interacting with each other, and that's an infinite thing that's as primal as possible. It's like, what causes reproduction? Like, what causes things to be produced, right? It causes a production. But of course, the postmodernists are going to be like, oh, that's impossible, or that's just goofy. So, I don't mean to rag on postmodernists every single time I'm talking, but, don't fall for that trap. Like, these people taking everything literally instead of symbolically, when the whole point of it is to be taken symbolically. It's like you're misreading it on purpose for the sake of pretending you're a snowflake. You're not even a snowflake, you're just following the crowd that you've decided for yourself, your own niche that you've decided for yourself that everybody else who's doing it wrong is talking about. Just because you want to get your updates on Twitter or whatever, Tumblr, whatever. Have fun with it, sure, but don't take it serious. Because then you're just going to be reading everything wrong, and you're going to be not enjoying anything. And I know that path, because that's how I kind of was when I was a teenager. But the Chinese zodiacs, they have 5 phases. And so it might be a bit more difficult to remember these, because it's like 5 and 12. How do I fit these together? Well, this is all you have to remember. There's 2 of every element except for Earth, which has 4. Alright, so Earth is pretty much in the 4 corners of the wheel. So you have the dragon, the goat, the dog, and the ox as Earth. And then you have the horse and the snake as fire. The rooster and the monkey are both metal. It's like, whoa, that's totally metal. And then you have the pig and the rat as water. And then you have the tiger and the bunny as wood. And I just kind of want to explain that there are 2 of them, and to kind of hone in on why I'm saying there's 2 of them. Because there's 2 of each, except for Earth, which has 4. And that's how you get 12. 8 plus 4 equals 12, right? But also 8 in Chinese, it's related to the Bagua, which is 8 symbols in Taoist cosmology that represent the fundamental principles of reality. So it's a little bit closer to how we have the 4 elements in the West. But here, the 8 elements of nature, it's actually heaven, wind, fire, mountain, lake, water, thunder, and ground. So, that kind of sounds like Pokemon stuff, right? But these are pretty much the 8 elements of nature. And then there's the different phases for each one. I'm not going to get too far into that one, but I'm just saying to you why there's 8, and then Earth is the middle ground, but there's 4 of them, right? So it kind of makes sense when you look at it that way, that 8 means something in Chinese. Same how in Greek, 4 means something as the 4 elements, and in China, it's the 8 elements, right? So consider that next time you're watching, I don't know, Avatar Last Airbender or Shaolin Showdown or whatever the fuck you watch. Do we even really watch Chinese stuff? What is that? Raya the Last Airbender? Whatever the hell that movie was? Raya and the Last Dragon? What, do they have any magic in there involving the 8 diagrams or something? Either way, Chinese zodiacs, let me explain the 5 basic elements real easily, and you'll understand that each one of these has a yin and a yang. So that's why there's 2 of each, is that there's a yin and a yang of each element. And then for Earth, there's 2 yins and 2 yangs. And remember, when we're talking about yin and yang, we're not talking about something that's bad or good. Alright, there's no bad or good in it. It's that there's some that's based around chaos, and other things are based around order. And that's kind of how it works. So some of these zodiacs, they like to follow on order. Those are the So the ones that are based on yang, they like to follow order, and then the ones that are based on yin, they like to follow on chaos. All right. I know that's a lot. I know that's difficult for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around, especially if you're not used to looking into yin and yang. But I think that order and chaos is very easy to understand for Westerners. It's actually easier for me to understand order and chaos because to be honest, I don't remember which one's yin and which one's yang. I always forget. I always get the two mixed. But, it's kind of weird how I have two choices and I still get them wrong. But we have the 5 phases. So when it comes to the Chinese zodiacs, wood is the beginning. It's the springtime, right? And these people are patient, compassionate, and understanding. And they have roots, right? They have roots in relation to wood, meaning they take a big consideration into traditionalism or their family, family lineage. Something that's been around for so long, okay, why would we challenge this kind of thing, right? So wood is very respectable to not only traditions, but kind of like a conservative sense. And not only that, but they also grow because they're related to wood. So these people, they're very sociable and they are very practical and they like to advance rather than stay where they are. You can consider them visionaries. Like they like to become bigger than they actually are. And you can also consider these people wise because for some reason trees are considered wise, but it's because trees are in relation to age. It's like you'll have the same tree being seen generation after generation and you're like, listen, that tree has seen some shit. It's gotta be wise. It's gotta know something to make it survive so long because nobody's been able to kill that goddamn thing. So wood, consider it as like a very wise visionary, but it's not like everybody who's wood is going to become a monk. It's more like they're going to be almost like a crafty kind of thing. You know how plants are, they find a way to survive even though they shouldn't. Especially weeds, right? So the next phase is fire, which is the beginning of summer, as we remember from last episode. These people are the ones who are in it for the thrill. They love adventure. They can't help but feel out of control with how fiery their passion is for adventure. And they are constantly moving because, as we know, fire travels, especially in the woods, right? You got all this delicious wood being burned down by the fire, the greedy, hungry fire, always eating up everything, right? Except for the bones, I guess. A fire takes everyone along for the ride, so they do have a bit of a infectious personality, according to the Chinese fire, right? But you can also get swallowed up by them, so the fire is a bit dangerous. Be careful following fire people. But you know that they're not going to be doing things that are mundane or repetitive. They're not going to be that typical person in a person in a cubicle, right? They're going to want to go out there and start climbing some ledges, or they're going to be doing some skydiving. They're not really for like a one company and then just staying there and being comfortable. They're going to be like those internet nomads, right? And whatever comes into their mind, okay, boom, I'm going to do it. Hey, I should do this, right? And these are the horses and snakes. Then we have our Earth, which is the second summer. And this is the part where everything's getting mellow. And these are the meditators. These are the people that they're more likely to become a monk, theoretically, but I'm pretty sure that one's kind of different than in reality. So these are the people that they are the helpers. They like to help others, but they also like to think before they do something. And they are considered expert problem solvers. So before, with the Western elements, we were talking about how like air was like the people who are like the philosophers and they're like the problem solvers. Here it's Earth who are the problem solvers. And this is because they are the ones who can move mountains, which sounds kind of weird, but that's how the Chinese thought of it. And all they're looking for is a thanks for any bit of help. They're just looking for some kind of reaction and some kind of appreciation. They don't do it for the money, really. They're just doing it for the sake of helping others. They are very loyal in the sense as well. And all you can really expect from them is stillness. And this is kind of why you can expect these people... because the thing is that these people are The four zodiacs related to them are dragon, dog, ox, and sheep. And as you can see from dog, ox, and sheep, these are the domesticated animals that we depend on for a lot of things, right? The dog is the loyal, the loyal companion to the human, right? The ox is the loyal tool that plows through everything. The sheep is the loyal thing they cut the hair of to make your clothes, right? And they mow your lawn for you. And the dragon, in Chinese, the dragon is like a very wise ancient creature that's going to be able to take on pretty much anything, right? It's like a ruler. It's like a king or like an emperor. That's why the emperor and the dragon were almost the same thing. But here in Chinese zodiacs, they believe that the dragon is more likely to be like a corporate CEO, because that's kind of like their role. Is like the big leader, the one who can lead a lot of things. So they're thinking, oh, dragon, I have a dragon child. They're going to become a politician. They're going to become like some CEO person. But it actually turns out that most CEOs today, they're actually horses. The horse zodiac. And, horse zodiac was the fire one, the thrill seekers. So in the old days, maybe the dragon was most likely because you kind of had to be traditional. But now innovation took over. So the thrill seekers are the ones who are taking over. And people thought that the horse was the worst one for a child because, that's a wild child, I hope I'm not making it too complicated with that. But the next one after that is metal. And if you remember from before, metal is the phase where you start to harvest, because that's when you have your scythes and whatever, your sickles, and you're starting to harvest everything. So this is the time where you're starting to prepare for, pretty much the worst to come later on. But this is the time where everyone's kind of working together. And these are the people that they can be considered cold, but they're not quite cold yet, They're very rigid. Then they're also very sharp because, metal's sharp, metal's rigid. Metal can be dangerous, in a very offensive way. So they're considered minimalists, who are always on the offensive. They're always ready to attack rather than to defend themselves. And for them, satisfaction comes when you have the simplest plan. So they don't want anything complicated. They want to have something very simple to the point. All right? I know it's almost all puns when it comes down to like what metal is. But that's pretty much how Chinese spoke about it. That's the whole way that symbolism works, is that it's working off of a pun. And on top of that, they're very loyal. So they're not the leaders. They're just very loyal workers, because metal is what's used to have very loyal workers harvest all the crops, the rice or the what they call millet or whatever the hell Chinese people eat. Your prunes, anything that you want to collect, corn. So you have these metal types, and they're very disciplined, and they have very high moral standards, and it's very respectable. So these aren't quite traditionalists. These are more just very religious. So these are very judgmental, religious, but highly moral people who are very sharp. They're very keen. They have a good sense of what something should be done. They have a lot of intuition. And they're always trying to get very straight to the point. And another way to say this, these are people who are more likely to be classicists rather than romantics. The romantics are the fire people, and then the classicists, these are the metal people, all right? But these people, they're very compassionate as well. They mean well. They do tough love, right? But they mean well. And these are the monkeys and the roosters. And, funny enough, I'm a monkey, right? I'm a monkey zodiac. I'm also Libra. So one thing about me that I had to realize about pretty much what my zodiacs cause is that in my Greek side, my Greek zodiacs, I have a longing for balance, a longing for equilibrium, as well as some kind of wisdom. I'm always kind of seeking out information, right? But at the same time, I'm very playful, and I'm also very keen from my monkey side. And so perhaps I can be considered rigid or unyielding or always on the offensive because I'm trying to seek things out. I'm very active in that sense. And I'm trying to seek out some kind of wisdom. So that does cause me to become very confrontational when it comes to anything that's like a debate. So why am I always debating people online? Well, it's because I'm a monkey. I'm also a Libra, You can really easily see that. But that's not something that I was conditioned into doing. It's something that is natural for me to do. It's always, ready to question something without anybody really telling me to. And so that's why I can be considered having high morals, but it's more where I have a strong opinion into a particular direction that is not quite knee-jerk. It's like, you kind of have to think about it and be like, should this be the right thing to do for other people to do as well? So Rooster is also kind of very similar, but Rooster is like on the opposite end of that. So while the monkey is very like fun-loving and wacky, but at the same time it can be a bit too aggressive, because you know how monkeys are, they throw shit at people. Like the rooster is on the opposite side of that, where they take everything very serious, but at the same time they can also express themselves with their crowing very early, so they kind of express themselves at the wrong time. And then so after this you have water, and if you remember, water is winter. So this is the time where everything gets very cold, and pretty much everything fucking dies because it starts snowing. And so after the harvest, everybody gets all their food. Okay, now you gotta survive. So what do people do when they're waiting inside in the snow? Well, they start to entertain themselves. So that's why water are the artists. These are the people who are very likely to be expressing themselves through their very sensitive emotions. And they could be considered perfectionists, but it's more where they see themselves as more than what they are currently. So they're trying to strive to this like idealist idea, this idealism that's beyond them at the moment. So sometimes they look like they're frustrated when they're being an artist, but they love their own company, which is great because they don't really need to bother other people. They just want to spend time by themselves, drawing, writing, whatever. These are the artist kinds of people, and they love they love to stay away from drama, and they want to observe it from the sidelines. So they love drama, they love gossip. They are the ones who love to tell the story, right? They're like to be the narrator, but they don't want to be the actor. So remember that the fire people, they're the actors, but the water people, they're the observers. They're like the reporter, but not the hands-on reporter. So some of these people, they do like to become bloggers, or they do like to become some kind of social media influencer or something. But they also do like to find balance. And they do kind of need a calm environment because as water is, you start making some kind of waves, and the waves get bigger and bigger, so they have to be some kind of stabilization around them, or else they get shook up from it as well because they're emotional. They flow with the water. So if you start shaking around the water, well, the waves start splashing around, right? And so if you are an artist, most likely you're a water person. And that's if you're a rat or a pig. So when it comes to your art, your writing, or whatever you want to make from it, try to consider the Zodiacs as part of the personalities of your stories, of the characters in your stories. And another thing you do have to realize is that the Chinese Zodiacs are considered bigger, more powerful than the Greek Zodiacs. Because the Greek Zodiac is based on the month, which is based on the sun, and then the Chinese Zodiac is based on the year based on the moon. So what happens is that Chinese zodiacs are based off of chaos, and for another sense of the word, and then the Greeks are based off of the order. So Greek zodiacs are kind of based off of what we can kind of consider a minor element of our personality, and then the more powerful major element is the Chinese zodiac. So your phases are more powerful than your 4 elements, to say another way. So the 5 phases are more powerful than the 4 elements. And so how can you use this information to make your character seem more authentic? Well, when it comes down to the Zodiacs, in both sense of the word Zodiacs, we have things that are compatible and we have things that are not compatible. And for most of this, you kind of have to look for yourself because it's kind of hectic on how things are determined compatible and not compatible. There's also some people who are saying one thing while another person says another because it's not an exact science. And that's what kind of sucks, is especially these days where so many white women and so many people who are into the whole occult thing, they're using zodiacs as excuses. But this isn't the intention that we're going to have We're going to be using it for good. We're going to be using it so that we can determine what exactly is a good way to write our characters, because we're going to look into a very pre-modernist way in writing. And the things that are not able to really, contradict any of this or have like any room for error is the basic compatibilities between the elements and the phases. So if you ever want to determine what your character is going to do, look into the phases and look into the elements of each zodiac, and then just have it go from there. So, for a quick rundown, the Greek zodiacs are going to have compatibility, meaning that they can work together, or they're going to be very attractive towards each other. They're going to have compatibility with their own element and the element right below them, right? So it's going to be fire and air, they work together. Air and water, they work together. Then water and earth. But each one of these, they kind of see a similarity or comparison or compatibility depending on what the exact trait is. So you're going to look at these particular traits that they kind of share, and then that's where you go, okay, they can work together with this particular thing. Or they're going to conflict with this particular thing, depending on how you want to make it. And for me, I would definitely have somebody make, like if they want to make it like a nemesis, right? They want to make the exact opposite of what their main character is. Well, how do you do that? I mean, just look at somebody like, I don't know, Batman and Joker, right? These are very two opposite, opposing people. One's pure chaos, the other one's pure order, right? Well, if I had to guess, I would look into see what exactly Batman's zodiac is. So there are some people who say that Batman's zodiac is Scorpio, while other people think that he's an Aries. This is why I hate the internet. And then some people think that Joker's zodiac is Sagittarius. So, apparently, because these make a great couple, they end up making a great pair that are opposing each other. They make great villain versus hero, or anti-hero, whatever it is. But because Sagittarius is adaptive and lively, while the Scorpio is fierce and secretive, which, that's kind of how Batman is. I can see that in Batman. But then on top of that, you have to look into the Chinese zodiacs and all the other stuff to see, kind of what they're doing. This is more in a way to kind of explore both of these zodiacs to see what your character could be like. And you don't have to make it exact. You don't have to make it pinpoint accurate representation of these zodiacs, unless you're intentionally trying to be. Like, what's that anime? I think it's called Zodiacs, isn't it? I think that one's definitely trying to be about zodiacs, It's just a guess, but I think that the show called Zodiacs might be about zodiacs. That's the one about the guy with silver hair. All I remember is there's like some like medieval looking like boy, and he's grabbing at some girl who like goes into his tavern. I don't know. Well, either way, the zodiacs are going to be our nature. The zodiacs are going to be part of our natural primitive drives, and then our nurture is going to make up the majority of what we kind of use as a mask later on. So when it comes down to psychology, I mean, you don't need to necessarily know about psychology to know about characters, but it's good if you do. According to Jungian psychology, we have a mask, which is our persona, and this is what we show to others. Now, in Greek zodiacs, they do have a particular type of like a sign, and they call it the rising sign. The main one is called the sun sign. Then our emotions are based on the moon sign. And then the persona that we use, like for the majority of the time, that's going to be our rising sign. I don't really agree with this one, but it is kind of interesting to think of that some people are trying to compare Jungian psychology to zodiacs. I think it's trying too hard, honestly, because that was brought in way later, after Jung, funny enough. But when it comes to your character, definitely do try to figure out who they are first before you try to figure out why they want to do a particular thing. It seems like it's not that common, but maybe I'm wrong. But it seems that these days, the people who depend too much on nurture rather than nature, they want to have characters who do things for the sake of doing something, right? And I think that's very crappy writing. They're not supposed to be doing something for the sake of doing something. They're supposed to be doing it because they have a particular goal. They have a particular drive. It's like the plot is driving them rather than them driving the plot. And this also kind of goes for the villain. Like, why would the villain have the plot drive them? The villain's usually the plot, isn't it? Isn't the villain usually the plot? They're the ones who are active? That's kind of interesting to think of. There are movies these days where the villain is more active than the hero. Like, what was that movie called? It was the J.K. Rowling one. Fantastic Beasts? Bertie Bott's Fantastic Beasts? Whatever it was called. That movie sucked balls. The second one, right? The second one that came out? And then nobody watched? I think there's a third one being made too. But that movie completely ruined everything about character development, character-driven goals and everything. Do you really remember who the guy is? I don't even know who the name of the main character is. Isn't the main character the same guy who played Sam from Lord of the Rings? I don't know, he's British, so he probably looks alike. He's probably just somebody who looks just like him. But I think you know what I mean. You have to have an understanding of not only your character's emotions, but your character's drives and goals and what kind of makes them them and their personality. So with Jung, in Jungian psychology, he created something similar to the Zodiacs. And this is probably something that might be a bit more understandable to us these days. And you can kind of transfer the Zodiacs towards this new, like, Jungian archetypes, right? Because Jung determined that there are these things called archetypes, which are the very basic, structured direction somebody will take for a particular stimuli. So these archetypes are reoccurring, and we'll always have these in our stories. So no matter what, you can't really escape from this particular type of personality with your characters. One of your characters is going to have this type of personality no matter what, unless they're Bella from Twilight, who had zero personality. I know, shots fired. So for these 12, it's very easy to go through these. These 12, they are split between 4, like, main aspects. One aspect is connect with others, so their goal is to connect with others. Then there's leave a mark in the world. They want to have a message, or like they want to have like a footprint that says, I was here, and this is what I did. They're famous from it, or infamous. Then there is a yearn for paradise, so they're just trying to enjoy themselves while they're here. And then there's another one who provides structure to the world, so they're trying to not only help themselves, but they're also trying to help others, right? They're helping themselves, helping others. And each one of these 4 is split between ego, self, and soul. I don't remember if I went into these Jungian terms before, but so these 12 archetypes, they are a caregiver, ruler, creator, innocent, sage, explorer, outlaw, magician, hero, lover, jester, and then the everyman. The caregiver, ruler, and creator, they are the ones who provide structure to the world. The innocent, sage, and explorer, they yearn for paradise. The outlaw, magician, and hero, they leave a mark on the world. And the everyman, jester, and lover, they are the ones who connect with others. And so you could see a little bit of the Zodiacs within these Jungian archetypes, and pretty much that's what he did. He just gave them a different name. So the ones who want to leave a mark on the world, they go by ego. The ones who like to provide structure to the world, they go by order. The ones who are connected to others, they are social. And then the ones who yearn for paradise, they're all about freedom. And if this one's easier for you to understand than the Zodiacs, I say go on and try it out. See how it works. And these are more common in more modern movies. I like to consider the Jungian form as a modernist kind of way, because, you know, we all heard about the everyman, right? We all know about the jester. We all can understand what a lover is. We can tell who the hero is, the one who likes to go out and, you know, master something. And we all know who the outlaw is. They do it for the sake of being liberated from society. And the outlaw is actually kind of interesting because that one's technically almost always going to be the main hero or anti-hero of a punk genre of a story, right? So cyberpunk, it's almost always led by someone who's an outlaw. And if not, it's like an everyman who becomes an outlaw. But remember, you're not going to be replacing the Zodiacs with these archetypes. You would just be assimilating the archetypes with the Zodiacs, because Zodiacs are a bit more primal than that. They're a bit more before and more major. They're more part of nature, right? So with this being said, in the next episode where I'm explaining everything about writing, I am going to go a bit more into how pre-modernist, modernist, and postmodernist differ. Because in this episode, I was talking about how postmodernists, they don't really believe in things like Zodiacs. So instead, I will tell you what they do believe in and what they actually feel is more accurate for something in storytelling. And I'll probably also be rambling a lot about my complaints about postmodernism. I always have a problem with how postmodernists approach something, and it's because they approach it wrong in their own idea of what it should be. And it's because we're stuck in this weird area where we're kind of both modernists and postmodernists at the same time, because that's the way our audiences work. But I'll explain that a bit more into the next episode. So, till next time.